Hello. Do you ever wonder why Chicago is the way it is? What drove Chicago to become the way it is now? Let me take you back. I want to take you back 2,500 years ago. I want to take you back to Miletus in Asia Minor. Today it's in Turkey. Miletus is very famous because it's one of the first cities that was ever planned. Look at it. It almost looks modern. The great streets. Some streets are a bit wider than others. It's for horses and carts and for people. The orientation also of the streets is very important. It follows the geography of the land. But at the same time, it's in such a way that it doesn't get too warm in the summer. You get a nice little breeze. But not so much so that it gets too cold in the winter. And also right there in the middle, you have the agora. That's the public space. That's where all the citizens could come and debate and talk. So really, Miletus grew in some way because of some of the challenges that it had to face. Now let's jump a little bit. Let's jump 700 years. Now we're going to go to the 2nd century CE, and we're going to go to Rome. Rome is really famous at that time because it's one of the first cities, or arguably the first city to ever get to 1 million people. Now that's 1 million people with no electricity, no water pumps, no trucks, no cars, nothing. And yet you have to be able to provide enough food for everyone, enough water for everyone. And the Romans were really known for their water works. So they had all the aqueducts, and those aqueducts, so the water came from far away. And with the water would come, it would go to public fountains, it would go to reservoirs. So really the city had to adapt to all that. At the same time, when you consume a lot of water, you have to do something with the wastewater. And so the Romans are known to have one of the first sewers ever built. It's called Cloaca Maxima, and still being used today. Almost 2,000 years after it was built, the sewer system is still being used. That's going to be the most profitable piece of infrastructure ever built. That's incredible. Then, when Rome fell, that central command, or the power that was held, really blew up. And so the regions had a lot more power. The regions were a lot smaller. And so the cities really grew in a different way. Now you were on top of hills, and so you couldn't really have that nice gridded streets. You really had to follow terrain, topography. And at the same time, you were at war with everyone else, and so you had the defensive walls, and you had a lot of conflicts within the city, between the merchants and the residents, and so space was a big thing. And so the cities completely evolved in a different way. You can still see the public space there in the middle, and that's in Siena in Italy. That's the way it is today, but it was really developed in the Middle Ages, and it really grew in a different way. So you might see a pattern in what I'm saying now, and really what I'm trying to say is that while cities are partly shaped by the challenges that they face, and it's really like human beings, right? All of us, we're partly shaped by the challenges that we face. Now, I'm a civil engineer, and for me, as a civil engineer, whenever I see a challenge in the city, I see that as an opportunity. I'm excited by all the challenges that I see. That's what I do, and that's what we do in civil engineering. And now we have a lot of challenges that we're going to face, but I see all of those as opportunities to change things. Let's go through a few more stories. First, I want to bring you to the other side of the world. I want to bring you to Tokyo. Now, in the 1800s, Tokyo also went to 1 million people, but Tokyo was really different. Not like Rome. It was close to the sea. There were a few rivers, a few canals, and so they could actually use those canals. And they built more, so some man-made canals. And so what would happen is that during the day, the farmers from just outside Tokyo would bring all the food to the people of Tokyo. And this way you would have all the food. Now in Tokyo, of course, they consume water. And when you have water, you have wastewater, sanitary sewers. That's all the pee and poop and everything else. So in most cities, the way that they work with it is they had to take everything and put them on carts. And hopefully at night, when everyone was sleeping, they would get rid of everything. In Tokyo, they didn't do that because they had all those canals. So the building owner actually owned all the sanitary sewer. And they would sell it to the farmers, and then the farmers would use them as fertilizers. So the farmers come in the morning, take the canals, bring all the food, get all those buckets, and bring them back to the farm, and to get the gardens and the vegetables growing. That was incredible. Now let's go closer to home. Let's go to Chicago. Now Chicago was really small early in the 1800s, but then it grew, and it grew really massive. And by the late 1800s, really what most cities did was to have more and more water to be able to clean up the city. And fortunately in Chicago we have Lake Michigan, so we have tons of clean water. And at that time with some steam engines, so we could get the water and just distribute it to all the houses. And then people drink and drink and drink water, and then that water has to go somewhere. Here's the problem, Chicago is flat. If you want to have a sewer system, you need to have a slope. The water has to go one way, the wastewater has to go one way. What do you do when it's flat? So the way I imagine that it went is some people just had a meeting at some point one day, and they were together, and they were like, what do we do? Chicago is super flat, we need to build a sewer, what do we do? And then someone rose their hands and said, well, we need that elevation, right? How about we raise all the buildings? Can you imagine raising most of the buildings in the city? How crazy of an idea it is? How positive you have to be able to even come up with that idea? And of course, that's what they did, right? Sometimes with people still in the buildings, they would raise all those buildings. And now and it was raised about my height. Most of the buildings in Chicago. And now you have that elevation, and then you can put the sewer system, and then you get the sewer system to go to the Chicago River. Unfortunately, then the Chicago River goes towards Lake Michigan. That's where you get your clean water in the first place, so that's a big problem. You get your clean water from Lake Michigan, you drink it, sewer, Chicago River, back to Lake Michigan. So then they had another meeting, and then they were like, oh, we can do whatever we want, right? We're pretty crazy now. Let's reverse the flow of the Chicago River. And that's what they did. So now the Chicago River, instead of going towards Lake Michigan, it goes away towards the Mississippi River. How crazy is that? And now, of course, we're much better at treating our wastewater, so now we're even thinking about reversing it back towards Lake Michigan. That's what we can do. That's pretty crazy. And of course, Chicago grew and it grew and grew and grew more again. That's a satellite picture of Chicago today. I like it because it almost looks like we lettuce. See the green streets? And instead of the agora, now we have parks and sports facilities and big box stores. Really looks in a very similar way. The congestion, of course, now is a big problem, but we're going to talk about that soon. Just one more thing. Remember that picture of Tokyo that I showed you? That bridge behind me? That's the Nihonbashi Bridge. It's the first bridge that was built in Tokyo. It was a bustling area with tons of shops and people and restaurants. It was an amazing place. That's in 1800. So you go to 1911, they rebuilt it, but now it was made of concrete. But still a bustling place with a lot of people. It was a wonderful place. So of course, when I went to Tokyo a few years ago, I had to go see that bridge. It was the first bridge, it was such an amazing place. You want to know what it looks like today? Yes. Not that green thing. That green thing, that's an elevated expressway. I'm standing on the bridge. So that wonderful area that used to be bustling with shops and with people, now is just a little place to put an electric expressway. And of course, congestion is bad, so we got a challenge to solve. What we can do? Well, you'll see. There's one idea, something that happened in a different city, and I want to talk to you about that afterwards. But so, if you ask me now, what are going to cities look like in the future? I got to tell you, well, we got to look at the challenges that we're facing now. And by addressing those challenges, we're going to shape the cities. And there's really two big challenges, at least on the urban infrastructure side, that I can think of. The first one is we're consuming way too much energy and way too many resources. We consume too much water, we consume too much electricity, we consume too much transport. And that's a big problem. We need to reduce that. The second one is that we're not resilient right now. So we have more extreme events. They're more severe, they're more frequent. And so urban infrastructure in the future is going to have to change dramatically so that we have cities that are more resilient. Now this is a problem for civil engineers, but not only for civil engineers. Everyone needs to get involved. No matter whether you work in the public sector, in the private sector, whether you're an artist, whether you're an architect, whether you're a medical practitioner, everyone needs to get together and we need to talk about this. And we need to work on it together and we need to be positive about it. Now let's go through a couple of examples. The first one is transport. Here's a picture that I took. I was going to a conference. I don't have a car, so I just take transit and I take the subway to go to the airport. And this is traffic. And that scene is very common now in most cities around the world, really also in North America. And the problem here, the major problem here is space. One car with one person takes too much space. That's why transit is so much better. Just because you get more people together, closer. And so you can transport more people and further. And so space is going to be something that we're going to have to address. So transit definitely has a huge part to play, a huge role in the future. The other thing is also we're talking a lot about autonomous vehicles nowadays. So who knows what's going to happen with autonomous vehicles? Self-driving cars, self-driving buses. It's pretty great. I mean, we live in really exciting times. We can do whatever we want. We can define the cities of the future together. The thing in transport is you just get people closer together. Now, cities in North America really grew in the 1950s and 60s, and the solution thought at the time was to really build these massive expressways and to send people to the suburbs. In Asia, a lot of the cities grew in the 1980s and 90s, and so they saw that that didn't really work. So instead, they decided to build up. When you build up, you get more people together, people can walk to work, or transit, or you also have a social cohesion that's better. And so that's an example of Hong Kong. But same thing happens. I lived in Singapore for a year, same thing, they really built up. And so the tall buildings are going to stay here for a long time. And that's pretty exciting. Another one is water. Now water, there's really three main challenges that we're facing with water. The first one, like I said before, is that we're consuming too much water. Way, way, way too much water. Now, in the 1700s, roughly on average, people were assumed to drink about 5 liters of water per day. That's a bit more than a gallon. That was, can you imagine, just 1 gallon for everything? For shower, for drinking, for everything, 1 gallon. Now, at the 1800s, there was a problem, so they just increased that. So we went to 30 liters. So we went from 7 liters or 5 liters to 30 liters. That's about 5 gallons. So 1 gallon to 5 gallons. Do you know what we're consuming now? 100 gallons. 380 liters on average. So we went from 1 gallon to 5 to 100. And of course, that's not everywhere like that. If you go to water scarce areas like Singapore, like Israel, they drink about 140, 150 liters per day. That's about 40 gallons. So there's tons of ways that we can do to reduce how much water we consume. So that's number one. The second one is a very challenging one, but it's a super fun one. It's how you distribute water. So right now, the way it works is we get water from a clean source, the lake, river, groundwater well. We treat the water, and then we distribute it in a network of pipes. Tens, hundreds, thousands of kilometers of pipes. The water always has to be pressurized. Always, always, always. Because any leak has to go out. You don't want any water to go in, because otherwise you can contaminate your system. And that's not resilient. Always, always under pressure. Leaking rates in the US are thought to be around 6 to 9%. But it's not always like that. I mean, at least if you go to London, or if you go to Mexico City, it's closer to 30%. If you go to Rio de Janeiro, if you go to Sao Paulo, it's 50%. Can you imagine 50% of all the water that's taken, that's treated, is just lost as leaks? So we're going to have to change that. We're going to have to completely redefine. The Romans did it one way. We've been doing one way for the past 150 years. We're going to have to completely redefine in the future. How exciting is that? I know I'm super excited to be part of just of the conversation, just to be able to think about it. That's problem two. Now, problem three is that cities are very, very large. And most of them are paved. So we have pavement, or we have concrete. And really, that's kind of like having a city or an area with a big plastic bag. So whenever it rains, the water has nowhere to go. So it just goes towards the sewer. And then you get sewer backups, and you get sewer overflow, and you get a lot of problems. So what we can do for that, really, is to make cities more permeable. And one example for that is rain gardens. That's an example right here in Chicago on Argyle Street. So if you see here, look at the pavers. So first of all, whenever it rains, the water goes in the pavers, because there's a little area, a little gap there between all the pavers. If there's too much of it, then it overflows, it goes towards in the rain garden. And then if it's too much in the rain garden, then it gets to the sewer. So for day-to-day rains, it's totally enough. For huge floods, it might not be enough, but for day-to-day rains, it's totally enough. And there's absolutely nothing technical or technological about rain gardens. Everyone can build one. If you want to build one in a park, in your house, anywhere, it's super easy to build. And look at that. At the same time, we're restoring the biodiversity in the area a little bit, and it's also so much nicer to see, you know. And so green infrastructure, rain gardens are really going to have a big play in the future. So I mean, there's so many things that we can do, so many challenges, so many exciting challenges, you know. And if we're positive about them, that we can solve. I want to finish with one more story, because I think it's a wonderful story. We're going to go back to Asia. This time we're going to go to Seoul. Seoul in Korea, that's an example. See, we can't really see much because of the resolution. It's a really old picture. That's the Cheonggyecheon River. It was a small creek. In the 1950s, what happened is that Seoul really expanded. Really, really wide. And they really had a problem with traffic and space. So what they decided to do was to put the creek in a big drain, pave over it, and build a massive double-story expressway. I'm sure you can imagine what happened, right? The pollution was bad, traffic got worse, car exhausts were horrible. And so much so that in the 1990s, they decided to change it. They said, enough is enough. Let's get it back. So they really invested in their transit systems to make sure that people had an alternative to cars. At the same time, they redistributed some of the traffic to other streets. And that's the way it looks like now. They restored the creek. The biodiversity is back. Look at the green area. That's a picture that I took. It's my favorite area of Seoul. It's a linear park, so it's super nice to be there. And see how the elevation is just below the road level? So whenever it rains, whenever they get a flood, they just send all the water there. What are you going to do, flood a park? How imaginative. I love that. It was a big problem, a transport problem. It became a water solution. So really, for me, it's easy. Every day I wake up, I have the best job in the world because I get to see the future generations. I'm super optimistic, super positive about the future, because every day at the University of Illinois Chicago, I see how determined the students are, how passionate they are, and how they want to change the world. And that really makes me feel better. And so I think that if all of us, together, if we work together, and if we take a positive approach, we can definitely come up with creative solutions to make cities that are smarter, that are more sustainable, and that are more resilient. Thank you.